Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void mostly about books. I'm doing Criminology's Read What You Own challenge, where my husband has picked out 100 books for me to read, wrap them up, and then I'm reading them one at a time, and I have just finished No Logo by Naomi Klein. Now, this is a nonfiction book, a journalistic piece of work, where Naomi Klein has looked into branding, in a sense. So what I mean by that is that she has looked into how corporations has built up brands, the culture around building up brands, but also how they, to protect their brand, ship off production to other countries and then have them create these products, sometimes without a logo, because it's cheaper, pretty much. So she starts by describing where she lives, which is in an old factory. And then she talks about a scene where she has traveled to Asia to visit one of the factories there. And then she goes historically through from about the 1980s up until this was a reprint. So she first published the book in 2000. So from the 1980s to the 2000s, about the aspect of branding, pretty much. And Naomi Klein in this book doesn't really say anything that isn't already very much known. So she talks about how production is shifted overseas, because that's a way of keeping costs down, but also it's a way of keeping everything mobile. Because if you don't have people that are invested in the factories, that aren't invested in what is going on, it's very easy to just shuffle them away if you're going to do something different. In the way they also work against, for example, unionizing. We know all of that. We know how people are being exploited for us to have cheap clothing and cheap electronics and all of that good stuff. She talks about branding and the movement from the brand being the brand to people being the brand. Especially example with Michael Jordan, who is probably the best example. And I grew up with Michael Jordan in the sense that I was a kid when Michael Jordan did all of the things that it made him such a synonymous with brand and branding and being an ad. And it's probably one of the first real influences we have. He didn't just make brand deals, he was a proper influencer. And all of this is known. What I liked about the book is that she puts it very much in an historical context. She explains the process of how we ended up, where we ended up, and why it's so difficult to do something about it. This is very much, she puts it in capitalism. This is about capitalism. This is about making money. And capitalism allows people to treat other people like crap. And that's why they are able to make money. And also why it's so difficult to actually do anything about what things that she is describing. Sure. Now, the thing that I probably thought about the most when reading this book has to do with the concept of call. And what she talks about there is how if you want people to buy a product, you need to make them want to buy the product. And you get them to want to buy the product by making the product cool. And you make a product cool by having cool people buy them. For example, she talks about Jordans and the connection with African Americans and the ghettos, and how the fact that people in the ghettos loved buying the Jordans, which made white suburban teenagers want to buy the Jordans because they thought the African Americans living in the ghetto were cool or had some kind of coolness to them. And that is what the Jordans wanted. It wanted the people with money to want to buy them because they are cool. And it made me think about the concept of cool, and is it possible to have a concept of cool outside of a hierarchical system? So could this actually function, everything she is describing here with cool, with branding, all of this is about getting people to want to buy a product by linking it with the right ideas and the right people. And is that possible to do in a society that isn't hierarchical? Or is the fact that some people are deemed cool and some are not just proof of an hierarchical idea? And I'm saying this very, very well in the fact that African American teenagers in the ghetto wouldn't probably put themselves on the top of a form of hierarchical system. But in coolness, they do. And I think part of that is because they are deemed exotic. That's a completely different theme, of course, how things that are deemed exotic, kind of taboo, is linked to desire, which is then linked to cool and linked to, I want to buy it, so let me pester my parents until they buy it. But does she sort of reveal the fact that you need to have a system that doesn't let everyone play on an equal playing field for any of this to be able to function? And why is it so difficult to get rid of that? Why is it so difficult for us to agree with everything that she does here? Most people will say that, yeah, this isn't right. It's not right that you are abusing people in another country. That you are lying to them to put them in a situation where we are in practice treating them like slaves in sweatshops. But we're not stopping. And it reminded me of a YouTube Shorts, which I think was just a re-upload of a TikTok that I saw, of a young girl who asked, where are all the normal clothes? Why is all of the clothes either $5 shirts that are fast fashion or $200 shirts that are extremely expensive? And it made me think, is it possible to actually create clothes cheaper than $200? Or is that just the price of clothes when we don't want anyone to be exploited? And that we're just so ruined by fast fashion, and not necessarily fast fashion in and of itself, but our desire to be cool, which makes it okay for us to exploit fast fashion because it makes us cool. I don't know. I really like the book. She's a brilliant writer, but it is, of course, a historical book. You're not really going to, unless you know nothing about sort of this theme of branding, you're not really going to learn anything new. But she does put it in a historical context, and that might be a new way of organizing it. She's very good at telling the narrative of how we ended up the way we ended up. And it also was very nice just on a personal level, because this is, of course, a nonfiction book that is a journalistic piece of work. Because I've been thinking a lot about different types of nonfiction. That when we usually talk about nonfiction books on social media, we very often talk about books that are fun, what I would call fun fact books, which are books that are telling about facts, but in a very much just here is a bunch of fun facts. And as someone who reads a lot of, for example, theory books and philosophy books in my job, realizing that I don't really read a lot of nonfiction because I'm not really drawn to the fun fact books. Thought it was very weird in the sense that don't I read nonfiction books? But this proves that I do actually enjoy nonfiction books. It just needs to be the right type of nonfiction books. So that was a No Logo by Naomi Klein. And now I'm going to pick out my next book. So all of the books are wrapped. I do not know which ones they are. And all of them have a number. So I am going to pick them. And this time I'm going to read book 70. Give me a moment and I'll find book 70. Don DeLillo, The Silence. I have read very little Don DeLillo in my life. I absolutely need to read more Don DeLillo, just because he is one of those names that is very much talked about within certain parts of BookTube. So whether or not I'm going to love his books, I would very much like to know more about some of them. So I have some more to orient myself. And I'll just read on the blurb. Don DeLillo completed this novel just weeks before the devastating advent of COVID-19. The Silence is a story of a different catastrophic event. It is Super Bowl Sunday in the year 2022. 5 people are due to have dinner in an apartment on the east side of Manhattan. The hosts are a retired physics professor and her husband. They are joined by one of her former students and await the arrival of another couple, delayed by what becomes a dramatic flight from Paris. In the apartment, talk ranges wildly. The opening kickoff is one commercial away. Then something happens, and the digital connection that have transformed our lives are severed. What follows is a dazzling and profound moving conversation about what makes us human. Never has the art of fiction been such an immediate guide to our navigation of a bewildering world. Never have DeLillo's precisions, imaginations, and language been more illuminating and essential. This was very much what I thought I would be getting in a book like this, and I'll so subscribe if you want to know my thoughts of it. And thank you for listening to me screaming into the void.